Dan and I talked about some of the issues that people here at First Pres Marshfield really care about and are kind of motivating forces right now, how we might use this time to maybe address some of those issues and draw upon my role and experience. So we kind of framed it as a conversation about how change can happen within the Presbyterian Church. But I also see it as a chance for you to do a little bit of hijacking, if you wish. No, what I care about is this. Tell me about this or whatever. I watched the presentation this week of the Presbyterian Historical Society about the legacy of a Presbyterian pastor named David Sin. And 50 years ago, well, 49 years ago, he held up a sign at the 1974 General Assembly. Is anyone else out there gay? And it was revolutionary. This 1974. This is in my lifetime. I was a board member of the Covenant Network of Presbyterians for a long time. 2001 till 2016. And for the last 8 years that I was on the board, I chaired the group's strategy and organizing team as we prepared for general assemblies, and we worked on the issue around inclusiveness around ordination and then expanding the definition of marriage. So that's some of my background about how change can and does happen in the Presbyterian Church. It was a long struggle. I'm a straight ally, so I don't have as much maybe like my friends. There were a lot of personal things that were said during those years, and there were a lot of attacks that were made. And I can look back on it, and I don't feel necessarily some of those personal slings and arrows, and can remember more the celebrations and the accomplishments and the people that brought together. But I just, even on this panel that it was put together for this 50-year commemoration of this Pastor David sent, there were others who said, there's still a lot of pain looking back on those. But at times, come on in. At key moments throughout this, our organization and other organizations asked that same question that was part of the sermon. What time is it? Is it time to mount up another challenge? Do we try to get another overture to come to the assembly and to try to get that passed at the assembly and in the form of an amendment? We just lost last year.
We're not done.
Right. Do we change the wording? Do we need to do it better? Do we take a pause on the constitutional political work and try to change hearts and minds in a different way to build up more support so that the next time it happens, it's a better result? A lot of that thinking. What time is it? What's most helpful right now? What kind of motivated that? And that may be a part of some of the issues you care about at First Marshfield. What time is it? What's most needed? Is collaboration, is finding other people who care about this the most important thing to do? Is it changing the book of order to make for something that you want to see happen? What's needed? What time is it? As we stood on the cusp of securing enough votes to ratify the new constitutional language about ordination, it was going to be really close. Sorry.
I don't know specific about what you're talking about. You're talking in generalities. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And what is the language that people were trying to get changed?
Yeah. Thanks. All right.
Can you describe the Covenant Network? Perhaps would that help?
Well, ordination of.
Give us some context. You're speaking to a group that already knows about all this. That's not true for all of us.
Yeah. Fair. It's interesting what I remember in hindsight. What I can quote this definitively is that there was a clause put into the Book of Order or the Constitution of the Church of Presbyterian Church, and it's labeled with G60106B. That's the part I can do for sure. I can't quote you exactly what it said, but this was put in 1990, mid 1990s, I think 1996, called the Fidelity and Chastity Clause. That, from the 70s, 80s, 90s, there was a whole lot of questions around homosexuality and what is it, is that okay? Is it not okay? What does the church say about it? Can someone who is an open homosexual be ordained as a pastor in the Presbyterian Church USA? And in the mid 90s, a clause was put in that said, well, maybe somebody here could remember it better, but basically saying no. The answer to that is okay. Yeah, it was an interesting one. So it was fidelity within a marriage between a man and woman, or chastity in singleness, was a requirement for ordination.
And that's for ordination,
For elders,
all levels,
deacons,
or just for,
pastors. Yeah.
just for pastors?
All levels.
All levels.
Okay.
Yep. Now, there were, and so what time is it? Well, there were some, we need to understand those language, because maybe that doesn't read the way you think it reads. Maybe it's not such a blanket prohibition by a lawyerly reading of those phrases. And so sometimes there was a trying to carve out some space so that deacons and elders and ministers could be ordained or could minister faithfully and without threat of being prosecuted. But we knew that language had to change. So that's when I talk about ordination, it was getting to a point where that the church could explicitly welcome as deacons, as elders, as ministers of word and sacrament, gay and lesbian Presbyterians.
And that has shifted.
It has shifted.
And that was when?
2011.
Okay.
May 10th, 2011 is when, so for change to happen, for constitutional change to happen in the Presbyterian Church, it often starts locally within a session or within a presbytery saying, what do you think the church would be more faithful if we changed something? And it requires a wording change. And so the session of First Pres Marshfield might say, well, we're going to propose that to our presbytery. Presbytery hears and go, oh, that is a good idea. Presbytery votes to do that and sends it on to the General Assembly as an item of business for that General Assembly to consider. General Assemblies used to meet every single year. Now they meet every other year. And because so much business would come, because there's so many different things, it became that we want to test your idea a little bit before it becomes part of the docket, because the General Assembly has to work on every single item of business. So you need to find another presbytery to concur with you that that's a good idea. So you got to get a concurrence, and then the Assembly works on it. But kind of that doesn't answer the question yet of does that change happen? It has to be then ratified, kind of like the United States Constitution. That ratification has to happen by a majority of the presbyteries.
I don't remember, how many presbyteries are there?
Yeah, there for years and years, for all my years with the Covenant Network, there were 173 presbyteries because we needed 87 yes votes. I couldn't always remember how many presbyteries there were, but I knew in my sleep we needed 87 yes votes. Because we were pretty good at getting the General Assembly to think that was a good change. We were not as good at getting 87 yes votes to ratify that change. No, but now there are it's been changing and declining. I believe the number is 166 as of today. And there are a whole lot of presbyteries, ours included, that are considering the possibility of merging with other presbyteries. So that number has declined as 2 presbyteries have become 1, or 3 presbyteries became 1. All right, so thank you. That was the first question that we worked on, was ordination, and trying to make it very crystal clear that was possible within the Presbyterian Church. And then the second one came, and that change happened much faster, but they're linked, was around the definition of marriage. And could 2 men be married together within the Presbyterian Church? Could 2 women be married? So those were the 2. When I talk about ordination, or marriage. Those are the things that,
And when did the marriage
Yeah.
actually change in
Yep.
the
I mean,
churches?
so many things happen so fast, right? You may recall, and of course now with just this Friday's opinion, the Supreme Court, what that exactly means for their latest ruling, but in 2015, the General Assembly in 2014 voted to expand the definition of marriage and to make it explicit that it was between two people. And enough presbyteries just overwhelmingly voted yes at that one. I don't know, somewhere in early 2015, enough votes were done for ratification. And then these changes to the Constitution always take place 1 year after the General Assembly adjourns. And so like for this year, we had 33 different amendments that got voted on, and they will take effect July 9th of this year. So probably the date that it became like official was something like July 9th of those years. But 2011 ordination, 2015 marriage.
So that would have meant that the time span would have spanned between two general assemblies, that the one happened in one general assembly and the next one happened in the very next one?
Yes. Yes. And there were several different attempts that emerged out of general assemblies around ordination, but the successful one was the General Assembly of 2010, and then ratified in the year after that. We almost got marriage out of General Assembly in 2012, the very next one, but it did not pass through the General Assembly, but it was very close and procedurally messy. But in 2014, it was.
So gays and lesbians were allowed to be ordained as pastors, but they could not be married.
Yeah.
That's an interesting progression. Yeah.
Well,
The first one is almost an overreach, and the next one seems like it would be
yeah, and there was, I mean, in hindsight, there were some who were saying early on, you gotta tackle marriage before you even get into ordination.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that wasn't how the issues kind of got presented through the church. And marriage also really got telescoped within society with the legal frameworks, right? I mean, a pretty short period of time, what was it, Massachusetts was the first state to legalize marriage, I think. And like, I've got good friends that they went to Massachusetts and got legally married. Oh, and then it became legal in Canada. They went to Canada and got legally, one of them's Canadian. And then in Minnesota, we got, I mean, but it was kind of piecemeal on a legal system within the United States and around the world too. But it was pretty focused, intense period leading up to the Supreme Court opinion that kind of recognized, made sure that a marriage in Massachusetts would be recognized in Ohio.
Well, that was, Wisconsin was against it until the Supreme Court.
Right. Yeah, right. All right. So that's some of the experiences I had of leading for change. And within that, there were different groups that had different strengths and different goals and different impacts. Some groups were really good at gathering people together to support one another and to celebrate. Our group was pretty good at trying to work the church constitutional system. There were other groups that were encouraging dialogue about theology and sexuality and teachings and things like that. All right. Thank you, Larry, for that question. Whoa, right there, Dave. What the heck are you talking about? Thank you. I hope that helped a little bit. All right. Where do you want to go with this? What kind of change do you want to talk about? What questions do you have? How can I be helpful? And how can we make this time great? Okay.
I saw recently a documentary on this woman that is from the Chippewa tribe that is trying to get into the House of Representatives.
Okay.
And it's in their treaty that they can be in the House of Representatives. And there are 6 other areas, District of Columbia, American Samoa, that have representatives, but they can't vote. And she has been in politics for many years and under different presidents and different positions. She's a lawyer, very knowledgeable. Now they finally have the money to go forward and do this from their casinos and stuff. So it's written that they're allowed, but for some reason the government isn't allowing it for her to come in. And it's the Chippewa Nation that is bringing this forward. And I just thought, the way they explained it is that the Chippewa, well, all Native American nations are the only groups of people that are guaranteed public health care in the United States. It's in their treaties. They get public health care.
Stand up over there.
So,
There you go.
so if there is, say they always have these threats of the nation closing down and Social Security payments not paid and this and this, there goes their health care. So she wants a say for that reason. I mean, it doesn't really matter what reason she wants it for, she's guaranteed it, they're guaranteed it. But they don't want shutdowns taking away their health care. They already have such strict rules where they have to be on the nation in the reservations for a year before they can access this free health care. So that is things that they want changed. But these things are guaranteed and they're having to pay money to fight for this. And I thought, this is a Chippewa nation and we are considered a Winnebago group, which is an Indian traditionalist word or whatever. So I would like to see maybe supporting some of their issue and getting her in there to have the right to say. She still won't have a right to vote, but she can say what she wants to say and explain to people. I mean, how many here knew that Indians were guaranteed health care? Do the legislatures know that? It's in their treaties, but do they know that? And they don't have anybody there saying it. So I would like to see something with that.
All right, so let's dig into this. Great example. What's the change that's needed? Okay,
Education.
education is it sounds like, because this was news to most of us sitting around, so some education around what are the issues, what are the people, so that would be an area. What else is needed? Relationships, maybe? How good a relationship do the First Presbyterian Church Marshfield have with the nearest group of indigenous folks? Strong? I didn't see a lot of obvious, so maybe, some relationship building, which, you can do that in a whole number of different ways, but that would be a different area.
How close is the closest kind of tribal land? I mean, I know, obviously there's near Green Bay.
Toma.
There's Toma is the closest tribal here.
I don't know, but I know that there's one in Toma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ho-Chunk in Toma.
The one church in Wisconsin that certainly does is in Wisconsin Dells.
Black River Falls.
Oh,
Yeah, UCC Church in Black River Falls.
Presbyterian Church in
Is it?
Wisconsin Dells.
Oh, so, okay. Yeah.
The Dells is big time.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we worked I'm happy the pastor down there.
Oh,
We worked
okay.
very closely with the tribe. At that point, Wisconsin Dells is based on Indian tradition with the dancing and that's a lot of their needs down there. And it was interesting meeting with these people. And we actually had a meeting with, we asked their elders to come in to a Presbyterian meeting. And for me, it was amazing because when the elders stood, the younger people in the tribes listened. They really respected their elders. And I thought that was wonderful.
Well, and one of the things that she said, she goes, this may not pass. This may not pass this year. We're a very patient people. We've been here for a long time.
Right.
Yeah. So that you know it's going to be a peaceful type thing. Transition.
Change is hard. Change sometimes comes quickly, but it's usually hard work for us humans to kind of make the change happen. But anyway, so that's a great, you think right there, okay, what's needed? Some relationship building, some education.
Political writing to senators.
Political writing to.
Representatives, scientists.
That's where the church does speak. The General Assembly does take on actions of like changing our constitution. How do we as Presbyterians do stuff? But also takes on a lot of social justice issues and make statements. We believe as Presbyterians that the people of Sudan have been long ignored and are in great need right now. And so we would ask that you devote time and prayer and resources to the people of Sudan. That kind of thing that doesn't require constitutional change. It's just some education goes into it. So those kinds of things might flow out of that, for example.
Can I ask, what is the prevailing religious background of the people on the reservations and whatever? It seems like what you hear historically, they have their own relationship, if you will, with God that is somewhat different than mainstream. So are we, if we try to assist with them, are we stepping on toes? I don't know.
Great question.
I think it's a genuinely good idea, but how do we go about it considering there's been so little respect over the years for the way they have their religion set up and their traditions and their medicine men, if you will, and all that has over the years really not been respected. So one of our bigger problems is going to be how do we not step on toes but yet offer assistance and help them realize that yes, and maybe that comes into that relationship thing.
Maybe it comes in the relationship building, but there might be some education needed even before that. Because the church has a pretty mixed history with Native tribes, right? There were boarding schools that churches sponsored that did horrific things, and some on like abuse, but some of it was just the prevailing philosophy. Was we need to Christianize these.
We're going to Americanize them. Well, hello.
So, Ken.
That's what, when you said relationship, I kept wanting it to go to the next step because it's not just a relationship. We need to be informed what is needed by them. It's not like traditionally it's always the group of white people that decide
We're here to help
what, okay, I'm going to help this group by doing this, and it has to be the other way around. So, and do they want help, and in what way?
Right.
Do they want help, and in what way, and what would be useful? Other than we can sit around all day and decide what we think might be, but then how do you not step on toes because you don't know?
Yeah.
They can tell us how to not step on their toes.
And there's just way too much history of the Caucasian
group
taking over and doing.
Yeah, and so part of that might lead to some confession of sin, right? We weren't alive when this happened, but we, the church, did some pretty horrible things, including specifically this, and specifically this, and specifically this, and we repent, and we want to make it better. Yeah, to say that sometimes is a precursor to being able to even have
anytime working with a new group, when you're going in, it's very easy to say, well, these are the programs we bring. We offer all of this.
Yeah.
And that's the worst question you can answer. The way to start, you need to know what the needs are before you can start to work on how you can help and work with people.
Yeah. Are you hearing us okay? We see you leaning in. Maybe a little hard to hear from people on the couch in the back, or?
It's okay.
It's okay, she says. All right. Good. Dan?
One of the things that I picked up in seminary in a course on change, the terrible course, it was the worst one of the worst.
Maybe they should change it.
feedback for change.
42 suggestions for you on how to change this course.
But one of the things that really I came away with is that change is a response to suffering. But it's not just a response to suffering, because suffering can it can create a kind of defeatist nihilism. It can bring up, well, I suffer too. How does this emerging awareness of suffering become transformational? How does it change the system rather than and shock it into a new way of being that is connected to the old way of being? Education is one, and one of my professors said that learning happens. Education is a process of change. If you learn something, you're different. You change, but. How do you frame that suffering in a way that gets people on board to address that particular suffering, or frame it in a collective way so that everybody identifies with that suffering?
And why does it matter? I mean, of all the issues you could be considering, why would this one need to be addressed? Well, let me tell you why this one needs to be addressed. But you know, there's a lot of suffering in the world. There are a lot of issues that might require the time of the session at First Pres Marshfield. How do you make the case that this issue I care about matters, right? And so, and then, but yeah, how do you?
An example of that, many years ago, the engineers at the University of Wisconsin, this is a long time ago, developed a solar oven. And they thought, man, this is just going to revolutionize indigenous people, and they were working with some tribes in Mexico, and they had absolutely no interest in the solar oven. They'd been cooking over an open fire their whole lives. They had thoroughly enjoyed what they ate. They had no interest whatsoever until one lady found out that she could boil water. And the one thing that they all wanted and could never get was a nice warm bath. And once they found out you could do that, the University of Wisconsin couldn't build them fast enough.
What's the thing that's motivating?
Right, right. Are there some commonalities? Oh, you like warm baths, I like warm baths. I mean, you know, let's find another issue you care about, and let's just kind of probe that a little bit.
Well, I think that one of the things that has gotten lost in the shuffle is poverty. And you know, we have the crop walk, and you know, but you know, as a kid, I remember I was raised Presbyterian, and it took a little detour. But they, you know, we would do the crop walk, but there was also kind of, you know, Bread for the World advocacy, and you know, we got I can't remember his name, but he's in Milwaukee, and he's, you know, he's part of the Barber group that really advocates for poor people, and you don't hear that talked about in the church. You don't hear it talked about in the political discussions. It's all kind of culture wars and not.
Some churches have a letter writing campaign.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, you set up a table and you look up people's representatives and you engage that way. It's one of the things that I think about sometimes. Now, have I done a thing about it? Nope. But I probably should.
But there's little pockets,
Yeah.
right? I mean, crop walk is a little pocket. The nutrition on weekends is a little pocket. There was that Feed My People, is that what it was?
Feed My Starving Children.
Feed My Starving Children. So there are these little pocket projects, but kind of as an overall focus.
And nothing to change the system that creates this.
Why don't people have enough?
Right.
Government's working on it. They're giving bigger tax breaks to the rich people.
I'm sure that'll help the hunger.
And taking away childcare supplements. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, all right, so great. And let's think about in the church. Any constitutional change needed about this? Probably not. We got a lot of teachings of Jesus. We don't have a lot of like writing, like rules that would perpetuate poverty, but it's more an issue of attention, right? And sustained attention and comprehensive approaches like, hey, crop walk is good, but, what's the next step to do more on this, to think about it?
Well, you may or may not be aware, we have a little closet, food closet and clothes closet down the hall. We've had one with us.
And a medical equipment closet.
But when I was talking to Cheryl this week, she is noticing there is a difference in the group that's coming. It frequently had been the unemployed. Now it's the working poor as well. And they have more difficulty getting okayed for it, than somebody that's unemployed or is disabled and can't work and that kind of thing. So when you talk poverty, I think for many, I'm not speaking for this group here, but I'm thinking many think of the unemployed, and there's such a political about that right now. But they don't think about the working poor, those who are maintaining jobs, but their job barely covers what they get for their job, barely covers their needs. Unfortunately, we have one in our family, and it's difficult for those kids to try and keep up with taking care of 2 young kids that can't be left alone, as well as the other bills and whatever. That group gets lost. If there's going to be attention things instead of an actual, plan to put some new rule through, attention needs to be to that whole group, not just the unemployable, the handicapped, or whatever, but also looking at that group that's hit. It's not like they're not trying. Right?
Yeah. So I think the church is doing some interesting things on anti-poverty efforts. I might, more about how do we make change, but I just want to highlight, because you just said there's something in Milwaukee, but Liz Theo Harris is a Presbyterian minister, and so Samuel Barber often gets a little bit more, William Barber, sorry. Samuel Barber, I think, was a musician. Who might have done some great anti-poverty stuff. I don't know about William, but Liz Theo Harris is a Presbyterian minister, grew up in Milwaukee. Her mom was a great Presbyterian elder who worked on poverty stuff, and so it's fun to see. I'm blanking on Liz's mom's name, but I'm good.
Liz, you're talking about Liz?
I'm talking about Liz Theo Harris. And so she has been working
with Barbara,
with Barbara on the Poor People's Campaign, kind of picking up on something that Martin Luther King was working on when he was assassinated. Anyway, there are some good efforts underway, but it's they don't often shine the light there on their efforts. Anyway, that's a great, And so you think about just how on a local level, how many people in Marshfield are struggling in poverty on a daily basis. There you go. Well done. And what are how do visitors come into church, and do they feel that they're welcome? I don't know. I mean, those would be kind of interesting things to think about. Does it feel like this church is welcoming to people across the socioeconomic spectrum? Are there subtle little things that happen that make sure somebody knows that, oh, you're welcome here, and somebody else might happen?
better now than it used to be before I've heard.
Yeah. Anyway, lots to think about that issue. Anybody else have an issue you want to really? Yeah, Larry.
I'm really concerned about the effect of the 2 recent Supreme Court rulings that have now made it official government policy that you can use religion to club other people.
Yeah.
Like you can decide that my religion tells me that black people are evil, so I don't have to deal with black people.
Right.
I don't have to serve them if I'm a pharmacist. I don't have to give them birth control pills. If I'm, the problem is we've created a situation where religion can be used as a club to discriminate against other people when you have a public duty. If you have a public duty to fill prescriptions. Now you can decide, your religion tells you you don't have to dispense birth control pills. I mean, I think these decisions have opened up an incredible problem. And to me, it's going to create a backlash against
Are
religion.
you talking about the
I mean,
Supreme Court?
it makes me angry to think that the Christian right thinks that this is good for religion, that religion can now be used as a club against,
Yeah.
your religion can be used as a club against other people.
There are so many arguments against religion to begin with, right? I've seen Colby. He's a jerk sometimes. Why would I want to be, I mean, but to like enshrine that and to allow somebody to say, yeah, because of my religion, I don't think I should be giving you this. I'm not going to make a cake for your wedding. I'm not going to give you birth control pills because of my religion. Yeah, it just. So what's the change that's needed, Larry? I mean, it's so fresh. It's a little hard.
I don't know what religions have, but I think to me that religion has to respond to say, that's not what we think religion is supposed to do. I don't know, I don't have an explicit, I'm still working over in my mind, but I think this was a huge blow against the validity of religion, to say that religion can now be used to harm other people who don't believe in your religion.
When I'm remembering, and this, thinking about, there was a letter from, I don't know, was it the National Executive Presbyter, something, I don't know what the position is, when Donald Trump was a candidate and said that he was a Presbyterian person, and this letter went out and said.
He's actually not.
Right, exactly.
He's not a member of a.
But that was a position.
Yes.
That someone who was in a position of authority took, and communicated. And what does it take to have that happen?
Right. Well, in fact, so the stated clerk of the denomination of the Presbyterian Church USA, his final day was Friday.
Mhm.
He resigned his term a year early. So they've just appointed somebody who's going to serve as the acting stated clerk of the denomination.
Transitional.
A transitional, but in this case, they went with acting, but on his final day, and he had worked in Washington DC at the denomination, had an office that connected to public policy based in Washington DC that he had served in previously to this. So on his final day, he did write a statement about some of the Supreme Court opinions that were coming out on his last day, and I don't remember how much he addressed that when he dealt more with affirmative. I know specifically he addressed the affirmative action ruling, and he talked about how he personally had benefited from affirmative action. So yeah, those kinds of statements can happen on a national level. Don't know who listens, but yeah. It can offer reassurance.
Right, it made me feel better that somebody was at least kind of paying attention enough to say this isn't the truth. But that isn't enough, but there's something to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is it's so fresh, right? I read the news, I follow politics quite avidly, and I still feel like, I haven't sunk my teeth into that specific ruling to really know what the impact might be, but it doesn't feel right to me either. So what's the change that the church needs to do? Yeah, Cammie.
Is there any leeway to do anything more than just make a statement? I mean, can it be written into Presbyterian government somehow that they disagree with a Supreme Court decision?
Yeah, I mean, so you can absolutely, it takes, and so those, it's like it's a statement, right? Those statements can emerge anywhere. I'm sure there will be some that people sign on to as individuals, or the session could say, here's a statement that we have written in response to the most recent Supreme Court rulings.
How much did those statements do? How much power do they have, though? I mean, yes, somebody that's in the upper echelon making that statement about Trump, that had a big thing. But, I mean, we're dealing with not only, I don't want to bake cakes for somebody, or I don't want to make a Facebook page and whatever. We're also dealing with a whole bunch of young people and older people as well who are not identifying with what their birth, gender was. And it seems like mainline Christianity is kind of just sitting back and not saying much. And I don't mean just Presbyterian Church, I mean that, Methodists, the whole mainline group. Catholics have spoken out some, but the rest of us have been kind of quiet on it. And that is disturbing, because it's something that if Jesus could take people where they were and accept them where they were, why in the world can't we?
We have an example of that. Joys and concerns that
Yeah. I mean, you don't hear anybody laughing during noise and concerns or anything, and, and it's accepting, it's allowing any person to speak out like that. But we need to speak out outside of these walls.
Yeah, so there's so much, again, thinking on this topic of how do you make change and what's the change that needs to be made? But I wonder some of, I bet there are people in Marshfield that just kind of assume all churches feel this way. And so, one kind of change might be, how do you get that message more out that this is a church that, fill in the blank.
Well, we have a lady over here who's done with the pride events and whatever. She has a Presbyterian church.
You're hiding in the corner.
Wait.
I'm hiding in the corner, but
Under a bushel basket.
I'm gonna let my light shine. We were one of two churches that were at our local pride event, and there were the protesters that were spewing hatred in God's name.
I'm sorry.
And there were amazing people who were blocking them, and every time I got near them, I ended up my temper got tight. I'm like, what am I gonna do? But
Yeah.
the number of little conversations that I had with people that would be like, I'm sorry, you're a church and you're welcoming to me. I thought that didn't exist. I had given up on church, and people who are crying, talking to me, and yes, we are here. We come, join us, and a lot of people, just different conversations are like, oh, you're the Church of the Rainbows. It just makes them feel just a tiny bit better to know that exists. And so, there is things that I am constantly pushing for us to do more in the community, in our own church. And I know that that I don't know enough about it, but I know the gender identity things that's something that the denomination is looking at, and where that there's things that I've been told I have to pump my brakes until we find out what's going on the grand scale. And to see where we all, we don't really know where we all are. I have a friend that goes to one of the ELCA churches in town, and found out that she is actually meeting with every single congregation member individually to have a conversation to see how welcoming they are, so that they, as a group, and I was like, wow, I hadn't, they're in a different place, of the 3 most welcoming churches in town, they're number 3, is my understanding. We're number 1.
We're number 1.
And that's from those churches, what they say, as far as how their congregations feel.
Besides us and St. Lutheran, who else?
Good Shepherd, that's the one I'm talking about, is that Good Shepherd, they're talking to everyone. And Wesleyan Methodist now just has a gay pastor that just moved in last week.
Wow.
And he's engaged to his fiance, and they know this, and they brought him in. So I was like, wow.
So they have a little different process, though.
They do.
Yeah, so,
Just that was the conversation I had.
yeah, the bishop kind of appoints that, so it'll be interesting to see kind of how that goes. We were kind of talking about.
Now, we're talking about who?
Wesley.
Wesley.
Wesley, yeah.
Yeah,
And there's quite a contrast between Wesley and
Zion.
Zion.
Yeah, Zion, I think, is trying to leave the denomination, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured.
And my point is, that we in these mainstream, if you want to call it mainstream, because it seems like our stream is getting smaller.
Main Creek.
Small tributary.
We're the Christian left.
Because a lot of rackets being made by the Southern Baptist and other groups that are huge, and they, the Bible says you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do something else. Well, the Bible doesn't say that. It's man's interpretation of the Bible that says that. Because the Bible says, accept people, love people. it doesn't discriminate between black, brown, Chinese, Japanese, American. It doesn't discriminate between whether you feel like you want to be a boy or a girl, no matter what your birth gender was. I get irritated, you can tell. But anyway, and we don't seem to be, and maybe we don't seem to be making enough noise, but maybe it's something that in the old Presbyterian tradition, which we've been a part of for now 30-some years, you just have to take steps. Well, I'm glad to hear there are some steps being taken. That's great. I didn't realize that. But is there some way to move that along? You know, some way to emphasize this is important. We need to do, you know, mental health issues. Presbyterians have never really taken a stand on somebody who's suicidal, whatever. You know, there's just a lot out there that we've not really taken a stand on. Personally, one person at a time, yes, but not corporate.
Well, you know, the last were, I mean, people spoke against them and for them, but they were specifically about language, and being able to kind of shift out of the gendered references in the Constitution, and those all passed. At our Presbyterian
Locally and nationally.
and nationally. So
yeah, I was trying to think, what was that reference to some work is happening nationally, that, because I wasn't sure, other than some language. And just so what Patty's referring to is there were 3 different amendments, because it was 3 different spots within the Book of Order, where when they were written, I think the people who suggested that language thought they were saying everyone. Men, women, and children, everyone is welcome. And now we might hear that men, women, and children, some people might go, do they mean me or not? Is men, women, and children trying to say you're either a man or you're a woman? I mean, so changing that language, I can't even, I mean, it was 3 different places, but generally it was like all people.
right.
But you know, even on a local level, there was one phrase in your bulletin that caught me today. Sisters and brothers. Does that describe, I bet when it was first put in the bulletin, somebody thought it meant everyone, sisters and brothers. But I'm not sure that would be heard that same way by everyone today in 2023. So I mean, I think there is some
Thank you for that.
language matters, right? I'm going back to this new neighbor coming to the Methodist church. And it's the Methodists are dealing with so many challenges right now, and they have a different form of government and a different way of voting on things, and it's really, really challenging to think about. I mean, everybody thought they lost, I think, within the Methodist Church, right? Because it's not like the progressive side won on things, but anyway, everybody felt like they lost. But I wonder what you could do that would not create more of a mess, and would not be viewed as like they're trying to poach our people, but to actually welcome in that new pastor and his fiance. You know, is it sending a delegation from First Pres Marshfield to his first worship service where he's there, and just saying, we're here, we just want to, we're here from First Presbyterian Marshfield, and we want to welcome you, and hope your first day is a great day, and we want to be here for it. Is it, sending flowers from First Presbyterian Marshfield?
I was gonna say, we did that. There's I think it's whatever church this is that used to be the driving range. But it's a fundamentalist church, and we sent them a welcome plant from Shallows, and Lori went over and talked to them. Baptist, yeah. And, so I would imagine that we'll, do something for the Methodist.
Because that's going to be a hard one, or even, just the bishop, and there's the bishop's staff, because they're meeting with tons of churches that want to leave the denomination. I think it's going off the path of faith.
Well, Sloan's the church I grew up in Colorado is a denomination.
Yeah.
So I was thinking two things. One is, the idea of speaking out and speaking up, which almost never comes without some kind of backlash.
Yeah.
When Pastor Scott was here, I mean, he was very much about ordination and same-sex people and went ahead of the denomination. Our church went ahead of the denomination, and that did not happen without backlash. Even the Pride event doesn't happen without that, right? And so there's kind of a modulated way that it seems like it's important to approach it, to navigate. You can't avoid it, but how do you also how do you mitigate what the backlash might be? And I don't even know if you can predict that, but I'm just thinking about that.
Well, I was so happy when Obama got elected. And I wanted to turn around and elect Trump. And I think that was backlash.
Yeah, Obama often talks about how there's a pendulum.
Mhm.
That change doesn't just happen this way, that
No,
there's,
sure doesn't.
yeah, change requires some lifting your hands in the air. Yeah, I wonder in a church because, a church is a community of humans, right? And that you get 3 Presbyterians together, you're gonna have 15 different opinions.
And 4 committees.
And 4 committees. How do you are there things you can do, generally speaking? I don't fully agree with you, but I really appreciate what you said. Because I wasn't thinking of it that same way. I'm whatever. I prefer putting sugar in my coffee. Oh, well, that's interesting, because I don't. But, how do you cultivate that we don't have to fully agree to work well together? And whether that's with, what's the name of the Baptist church down the road?
We both like trees.
We both like trees. Hey, you got beautiful trees too, so
So you've talked about language, and kind of one of the things that I've learned in my decades of doing therapy is that yes and is an important part of language rather than yes but. I see what you're saying, but, right? I see what you're saying, and have you thought about this? That if we are able to adopt a yes and approach, it's much less alienating,
The fence doesn't go up just poof.
Right. It really is different, and it's only one word. But it really is different.
Along with that, I've been thinking with parenting, I'm trying to figure out how to share with other parent friends the idea of when a kid tells you something, you're like, that's the stupidest idea. Instead of saying that, saying, tell me more, and give them the opportunity, when you oppose someone, give them the opportunity to keep talking and have a discussion instead of shutting things down like that, kind of like the yes and. It's like, I'm not on your page yet, but tell me more of what you're thinking or what.
I might not ever be, but tell me more. I'm really curious. I'm willing to give you a listening ear.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and again, churches, 3 Presbyterians, 15 opinions, 4 committees, and how hard it is when you get 250 people. But we have trouble in our relationships, right, with our spouses or with our kids. Like, oh yeah, we kind of like, tell me more, instead of just like, you what? Yes, and honey.
Honey.
So if it's hard on those most intimate relationships, we can imagine it takes practice at the church level too, and it's not we can't expect perfection. It's hard. Yeah, Dan.
There was a wonderful article in the New York Times this week. I can't remember which day, but it was about female pastors and church people framing opposition to the abortion ruling in theological terms. And one of the ways to approach these disagreements is to respond in an explicitly faithful way, using scripture in a way, using the very tools and quite frankly, using that, the sledgehammer that those kinds of Supreme Court decisions provide. If you know, it's about churches approaching these as a faithful, as an issue of faith.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you want to make change within the church, you got to use the language of the church. You can't avoid theology and just say, well, yeah, but people in the culture are changing. Well, you got to use some theological language. You got to use some Bible parts as parts of your argument, and they're there, rather than avoiding them. I think knowing when and how is a big part of that. But yeah, I think you're right.
This article actually mentioned a statement in 1992, I think it was, some Catholic bishops who were saying, well, if we're going to get in on this from a faithful point of view, that opens up the opposition that they can do the same thing. There was a recognition even back then that you know, when faith becomes a weapon,
It works both ways.
it works both ways. Yeah, a two-edged sword.
Mhm.
Well, you guys have been great, and my understanding is that these typically wrap up by about noon, and we're right there. So I don't want to. I'd rather end a little bit early with a little bit of passion, and then like, oh, for goodness sake, Colby kept us till 12:20. So I think
I'm telling Lori.
Yeah. Don't invite that guy. His sermons are long, and the forum wouldn't end.
You've done well on that.
Us as Presbyterians, we all need to eat.
We all need to eat. Even as humans, we all need to eat eventually.
Just started another role.
So this has been great. And if you've got another question you want to ask me, I'm willing to hang out after that. But let's bring this to a close here. I'm really grateful to the welcome I've received. I've had just so many wonderful experiences with First Pres Marshfield, often in subtle, quiet ways, whether it's talks with one of your great ruling elders who served in a leadership capacity, or whether it's with the session and doing some thinking, or again, this morning, I felt that welcome, even just walking into the parking lot. Oh, you're here early. Well, I'm a greeter, and I'm a new member, actually. I just joined here in January. And I mean, just a great conversation that made me feel so welcomed to be here. So thank you for that. And so let's wrap this up. I'm eager to hear more about what happens out of this church. And grateful for your specific mission and ministry. And I think you're doing a good job. So thank you. And the Presbytery will be back here in September, whatever that fourth Thursday in September. So we're looking forward to
September 28th.
There you go.
Yeah.
And there'll be some things we need to work out. We have it ready. But it's going to be great, and we're grateful to you for hosting.
Yeah, and I'm not going to come to that one on Zoom.
No?
I'll get here.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Thank you for your time. If you want to stick around, I'll be here for a little bit. And glad to hear
God
you.
said.
Amen. Go out and do good work.